when I joined the Illuminating Engineering Society's task group. They have a committee that publishes a recommended practice document for designers that addresses this particular subject matter. And I knew somebody in the group, and they thought that I would be an asset to that group. And when I started to dive into that subject matter, I realized how interesting it was, and how really it is a subject matter that is sort of affects everybody and is not really specific to a certain population.
Sorry, Greg, can you make, I don't know, the mic maybe closer? It's a bit distorted, a little bit. Your voice is a bit distorted.
Let me try another. Is that any better?
Maybe. Okay.
Let me try turning off my video here, because maybe that's
Mhm,
a drain
mhm.
on the bandwidth. Is that better?
Yes.
Okay. All right. I had a feeling that might be maybe a little better. So I was just saying that I got into this about 2010 through the Illuminating Engineering Society. They have a task group that is specific to the subject matter, and somebody thought that I would be very interested in it. And it also happens to be around that time when lighting was going through a bit of a revolution in neuroscience and how lighting impacts us biologically. There was a great deal of research that came about in the 2010-12 years, and it sort of changed the perspective most of us professionally have on the impact of lighting in many ways. And I kind of went down the rabbit hole, and I found this something that I thought was important to work into my practice, not specifically for low vision, but really I try to employ this in all my projects to some degree, because I feel like this is a subject matter that is important for everybody's sort of health and well-being. That's kind of how I've gotten where I am, and I've been in that committee now since then, and I actually chair that committee now for the last 4 or 5 years. So I'll just jump right into the presentation if that's okay. I know we have some limited time. So today I want to talk a little bit about uh, my perspective as a design practitioner and what we look at when we try to improve environments for anybody that has low vision. But I always like to kind of reframe this conversation as this is not an issue that is specific to people that have vision impairments. This is really a conversation about how to make lighting better for everybody, because everybody, no matter what age you are and what eye condition you may have or not have, most of this has been very beneficial for everybody, considering that most of us spend the vast majority of our time in indoor environments. So as a design practitioner, one of the things that is very important for us, and this is regardless of whether you're an interior designer or whether you're an architect or a lighting designer like me, is understanding what the problem is. So the beginning of this conversation, in these first few slides, I know I am preaching to the choir, because I'm sure that everybody here has a vested interest in this subject matter, because they are either living with themselves with some vision impairments or have loved ones who have vision impairments. So you are very acutely aware already of the issues that are involved. But it's important to show you, I think, my understanding and how we as practitioners distill this information down to something that's actionable. So we need a problem to solve, and we have to understand that problem in order to find a solution. And so when we look at something like vision impairments, as everybody on this call knows, no two people are going to have the same experience. So two people could have the exact same um, visual issue, vision impairment, whatever it is, and they won't experience the same environment in the exact same way. So that means everybody is having a unique experience, which is an incredibly difficult thing for anybody like me to be able to address in the built environment. So how do you really do that? And how we do that is by understanding all of the issues that are involved and finding some common modalities that allow us to address as much of it as possible. So we know as practitioners that there are all these natural age-related vision issues, and everybody is going to experience all of these to some degree in their lives. There is the reduction of retinal photoreceptors. We lose our rods as we get older. There's simply reduced the amount of rods in the eye, and the rods are monochromatic cells in our retina that are used in very, very low light vision. So if you're in a very dark room or a very dark environment, our rods are what allow you to sort of see shapes and shadows and give you some perceptual awareness of the environment. So they are actually used at a very critical time in the environment. So to lose them is very detrimental. Our lens hardens, which is why many of us need reading glasses. So the lens just does not move and reshape as easily to be able to adjust the focus. Our lens yellows, so it's physically changing color and yellowing. It's called opacification. And this is like putting on a pair of yellow sunglasses. Some of you may even have some special sunglasses that are yellow. Some people have these for certain vision impairments. And what you know when if you have them is that as soon as you put on a pair of sunglasses that are a particular color like that, it starts filtering out certain wavelengths of light. And with yellowing with that particular color, what it's doing is it's filtering out blue spectrum of light. And the blue spectrum of light, a very particular set of blue spectrum of light, is what entrains our circadian system and what allows our over 100 bodily functions that are timed by our body clock, our circadian system, to properly function. So you can already start to see that there are now these sort of biological connections that get disrupted. Our pupil gets smaller, so really what that means is the dynamic range of how your pupil can dilate or constrict is much more narrow. So you don't have as much room in that range to be able to react to the environment. We get an increased number of floaters in our eyes. This one, a lot of people are actually not aware of this one. So these floaters are these vitreous clumps that accumulate in our eye. And if you ever have the experience of, say, looking at a bright light and in the periphery, you see like these little amoeba-like shapes in your peripheral vision just kind of floating around your eye. These are the floaters that we talk about. And the issue with these is that obviously when light is coming into your eye and you have anything there that gets in the way of that light entering your eye properly, it creates a greater sensation of glare. A great example of this is if you're driving a car and it's raining at night, right? And then you see a car coming at you, the oncoming car with their headlights on, and it is immediately very blinding because that light is getting refracted everywhere, and all those water particles in the air and on your windshield, exacerbating the sensation of glare that you're getting versus if it was just a clear night. So those are obviously a big problem in our visual acuity. And dark adaptation slows, and as well as the range of dark adaptation is reduced. So when you go from the bright day into the dark movie theater or vice versa, the amount of time that you need as we get older to be able to make that adjustment to that darker light level increases greatly. But your dynamic range of how much you can adapt actually decreases. So it's kind of this double-edged sword. So we have all of these issues that we're trying to figure out how to manage, and then we also have to look at all the compounding issues. There are disease-related issues. So as soon as we start accounting for things like cataracts, glaucoma, retinal detachment, AMD, diabetic retinopathy, retinitis pigmentosa. I mean, all of you, I'm sure, are familiar with all of these, and they all sort of conspire to do similar things in reducing your visual field, blurring your vision, uh, obscuring some of your visual field. And all of this is on top of all of those age-related issues. So knowing what all of this is doing as a practitioner, we have to distill this down to something that's actionable. And so what we distill down for what we can actually make an impact on is the first thing is that all of these ailments and issues are conspiring to reduce the amount of light entering in the eye. So we have this physical reduction of the amount of light that is actually getting into your eye and is usable by your eye brain system. The second thing we realize is that there is this greater likelihood of glare. And glare is so very important because glare could be debilitating. It can cause pain. It can obviously obscure vision. And anything where we have, whether it's the floaters or whether it's a cataract, anything that is a foreign object in the eye is going to increase that potential for glare. And then the third item is that biological element that really exploded in 2010, 12 area, where we realized that we have these photoreceptors that are non-visual, and they are solely designed to be able to sense a certain blue wavelength of light. And that blue wavelength of light is most prominent, obviously, during the day, and that entrains our body, our circadian system, to tell our body clock that hey, it's time to be awake. Stop producing things like melatonin that make me sleepy and be active. And then as that light decreases as the day goes on and we get toward the evening where our light tends to get warmer, our brain is, eye is seeing that and our brain is saying, okay, there's less blue light. Now we need to start creating some melatonin and start directing all of our systems to get ready for our sleep cycle. So these are three things that as practitioners we can look at and try to target. And one of the reasons why this is also important is I always like to sort of throw this in there. It's a little bit maybe out of context, but doing some research as far as part of my task group with the IES, we were looking at what in these instances of glare and issues with not enough light. So the first two elements that I'm talking about, right? So not getting enough light in your eye, as well as a greater susceptibility to glare, which is going to create issues with mobility and you be able to assess your environment, right? These two things have a direct relationship with personal safety. And everybody that owns a facility of any kind is very attuned to this because they know that trips and falls are the number one problem that they have in any built environment element. And when you look at a graph like this, you see that unintentional falls are the greatest percentage of non-fatal emergency room visits in the United States, right? This is looking at all ages, all sexes, all ages. So this is not even age specific to an older population. As you can imagine, if we were just to look at, say, people who are over 65, that percentage would increase quite dramatically. So that puts a little bit of perspective on the critical nature of mobility as it relates to vision. But I also like to talk about, and a lot of people who own facilities don't even really think about this, is that you also have to think about your other aspects of vision. How do people read medicine labels? Right? If you have an environment that is not a conducive to your vision, right, you are compromised in your ability to be able to perform simple tasks, such as reading that small print that gives you directions on how to take medication, or even in the drugstore and being able to discern the details on a label to understand what you may need to buy for whatever you're feeling. And these are often overlooked by most designers. This is another example. That's something I often present in more of my design related seminars. You have to look at things like wayfinding and signage. and picking the right kind of graphics and contrast and colors and the size that's really applicable to allow people to easily discern the information. Materials like the picture on the left, where you can see that double image in the best case, is a terrible example of providing a visual indication signage indication of something important like emergency egress. Why would somebody do that? Just they don't think about the conditions that many people have to deal with visually. And then there's other kinds of wayfinding signage. I often show the picture on the right to say that, for the best of us, in the best cases in an emergency environment, if you were in a building, like an apartment building, and you were a guest there, and there was an emergency, and you had to exit via the stairwell, and people were panicking, and the lights were out, who is going to read all of this information on the wall and be able to figure out where they are and where they need to go? I mean, I can't do it. It's too much and varying sizes and fonts and colors, and it's just sort of very poorly executed. So we have to take this into context of these three things, where we know we need more light in the eye, and we know we need to deal with glare, and we also need to deal with now the physiological and the psychological effects as well. Vision loss is related to many things, such as impaired concentration and learning, pain perception, decreased productivity, depression, and it is the number one public health fear because it's linked to people's sense of independence. Anybody that is born with normal vision, that's never had to deal with not having vision, uh, is usually very afraid of losing that vision in any level because it directly impacts your sense of being independent. And this has a dollar value to it. Like this has a real impact to it because if your quality of life is depreciating and you have decreased productivity and depression and all these different things, your care demands increase. And that is a direct impact to you and your family's pocketbook. And it's a direct impact, say, if you're living in a continuing care community, the type of care demands that they have to provide you, it costs them more money. So all of these things are sort of fueling this desire to look at how we can improve the environment. Now moving on to the circadian disruption. This is really, like I said, sort of a revolution that happened in around 2010, 2012. As a lot of these studies were starting to really get vetted and the results were coming out that we were understanding that somebody that has a fragmented circadian cycle has greater instances of poor sleep and higher stress, increased anxiety and depression, increased smoking if you already are a smoker, increased instances of cardiovascular disease, increases in type 2 diabetes, which is pretty significant. And the last two here, I always highlight higher instances of both breast cancer and prostate cancer. And this was such a big thing when this came out in 2001 that eventually the World Health Organization labeled shift work a probable carcinogen, right up there with nasty chemicals and all sorts of other things, which should put a little bit of perspective on how important and how impactful this circadian disruption can be. Also, increasing care demands. So all of this, again, brings us as a practitioner down to sort of these three actionable items. We know that we need more light, okay? And we know that we need to manage the glare, and we know that we need to put ourselves in the best position to receive the right kind of light at the right time of day. Um, there was a great study done in the Netherlands, and I like to highlight this. This was in the early 2000s, 2008, because that this was a very simple study. So they took a couple of group care facilities, and within the spaces that people gathered, so think of like the activity areas, the dining areas, in those areas, in the affected one where they were going to make the changes, all they did a basic change in lighting. They increased the light level up to nearly 100 foot candles of light, versus the typical, which was about 27 or 30 foot candles of light in the baseline placebo facility. And they increased the color temperature from what was traditionally 2,700 degrees Kelvin, which is a very sort of warm, near incandescent like light, to 4,000 degrees Kelvin, which is a little closer to daylight. It's much cooler. The neutral point, just for reference, is around 3,500 degrees Kelvin. So anything lower than 3,500 degrees, we tend to read as warmer, and anything over 3,500 degrees Kelvin is considered cooler. And all lighting sources are rated for these color temperatures. So all they did was basically change the light bulbs. They just went in here and they increased the amount of light, and they increased that color temperature, making it a little bit bluer. And what they found over the course of this study was pretty astonishing. Um, Nightly restlessness was reduced by around 9%. Sleep onset latency was reduced by almost 20%. The duration of sleep increased. The cognitive deterioration reduced a little bit. Depressive symptoms actually reduced almost 20%, which is pretty incredible. Aggressive behavior reduced almost by 10%. And this one was astonishing, was that the functional deterioration of dementia patients was reduced by 53%, which was roughly the equivalent of what most dementia drugs were able to do, and are still able to do at this time. So typical drug treatments for early drug treatments for dementia were roughly mitigating the deterioration about 50% or so. And obviously, as you may already know, that as dementia increases, like the effectiveness of those drugs starts to decrease. But just simply changing the light bulbs in these facilities had this sort of great impact. And this set off a firestorm in the industry. So some of the resources I want to give you here are some pieces of information that you can use both for yourself to educate yourself a little bit more, but also to inform professionals who may be doing some renovation work on your home, or your business or whatever it may be. But there are some resources that you should know about. So the IES Lighting for Aging and Partially Sighted Committee is the committee that I chair, that I mentioned earlier. And we currently sort of monitor and we discuss all of this research that is happening. And we try to distill it down and as a consensus group of peers from sort of all areas, whether it be practitioners to educators to manufacturers. We have an ANSI accredited group, and we work to try to create professional recommended practices. Our document is ANSI IES RP28, which just was republished and revised at the beginning of this year. It is really designed for design professionals. It's written in a language that caters to them, as well as owners of facility managers and code regulators and regulatory agencies. And it addresses things like light levels, um, contrast between surfaces, reflectance values of materials, and sort of other design and environmental issues, including does discuss some circadian issues as well. It has some prescriptive requirements, as I mentioned, but also some general recommendations and awareness language. It talks about recommendations for space planning, color rendering, surface sheen and texture patterns, the applications of daylighting, light distribution patterns. It goes into a great level of detail. This is certainly accessible to anybody. I mean, it is a little bit again, like I said, the language is a bit professional and geared toward practitioners, but it is something that sort of anybody can get their arms around. But any reasonable design professional who is doing any work to develop anything in the built environment, particularly those who have any type of visual impairments or older population, should be familiar with this document. It's updated as often as we can. It took us about 3 years to work through the ANSI process to update it this last time. But we get a lot of play on this document internationally. It was a pioneering document and it is used all around the world. And our goal at the IES is to try and get this document to be codified as much as possible. So we are looking to other organizations to require compliance with this. And I'll give you a couple of quick examples. In Florida, if you're building a skilled nursing facility, you have to comply with RP28. The Facility Guidelines Institute, which writes guidelines for healthcare facilities, some of their guidelines require compliance with certain parts of this. So we work as an organization, the IES, to try and get more municipalities and more other organizations to adopt RP28 in an effort to codify it as much as possible, because that's the only way you get stuff like this implemented. This latest revision, we broadened the population because, as I mentioned at the beginning, we believe that the applications of solving the three problems that I laid out for you really are beneficial for everybody in the built environment, not just those with low vision. And we made a lot of updates to the requirements in there and brought everything sort of up to par with the latest research. Some of the things that are new is that's also important is we added some things like uniformity ratios. We updated circadian information. For the first time, we have actually contrast criteria and actually created a calculation for designers to be able to calculate appropriate contrast. And I always put a picture of stairs that have no contrast to them, sort of illustrate the importance of that. And this calculation is internationally accepted by the CIE and ISO, who are other international organizations. The ISO is the International Standards Organization, and they use this in their low vision document as well. We added very specific requirements for stairs, for light levels, and contrast strips, and giving specific calculation criteria. And we added more stuff in our appendix to reference more published research as well. Okay, so something that may be even more accessible for you is that we created this consumer guide. I've given a copy of this to be distributed to anybody on this call who would like it. This is written for you, for the end user, for the consumer, and it uses language that is much more accessible, and it also does it within the context of most living environments, which is where most people are concerned about the language. So we've taken the really technical stuff from RP28 and we've tried to distill it down into a consumer guide, which is like a consumer design guide to give you perspective on how you may do interventions in your own living environments. It uses all of that same guidance that I previously talked about. Another important document, I should also note that the consumer guide is completely free. I did provide it. RP28 does cost money to purchase because it is a professional document. But this document, which is produced by the International Code Council, is the accessibility standard. I am also on this committee and I represent the Illuminating Engineering Society on this. And I like to bring this up because this is the accessibility standard. It is more than just lighting. This is the entire built environment, so mobility and everything is captured in this. And this is typically what federal facilities typically have to comply with for accessibility. So it has a pretty wide-ranging impact. There are many sort of states regulators that require this as well, but it is a standard that's adopted by the federal government. And the reason why I bring this up is that this is an International Code Council. This is also an ANSI group, and which also means that it is open to the public. The committee members on this are the ones that develop it and vote on it, but anybody can attend meetings. The revisions are all go out for public comment, and anybody can comment on it, and the committee has to address the comments. And I always want to encourage anybody that has any stake in better community environments, interior environments, to get involved with something like this. Trying to revise a document like this, we are just about to publish the next edition of this. This one in the picture here was published in 2017. So that should give you some perspective on how long it takes to develop this document. And that is largely because of all the interests that are involved. There are a lot of competing interests from user groups, advocates like myself, but also manufacturers and other groups that want to make it, want to be careful they don't make things too expensive to build and create and are too onerous to comply with. And so there are a lot of sort of competing interests in this group, and any support we're sort of always welcome. If anybody finds the time and the interest to be an advocate for this group, you can go to the website for the International Code Council, and you can search for this particular standard, and you can find out when the meetings are and get an invitation and attend and voice your opinions on whatever is being discussed at that meeting. Okay. All right. So now to sort of the meat and potatoes, and I'm sure everybody is interested too, is I want to present some sort of opportunities for you personally as you think about your own environments, and give you some strategies to think about as you think about your homes and your workplaces and how you may make a better and more supportive environment for yourself. Some of the things that we're going to talk about are value contrast, object placement, luminance contrast, and lighting placement. Value contrast is measured as a ratio of the light reflectance values of two colors. So where that's important of is think about where the wall meets the floor, or say where the door frame around a door meets the adjacent wall. What is the value contrast? We always want to think about creating enough contrast so we can see the difference where there is an area of importance, right? So when you need to access something like an entranceway, you want to be able to see that entranceway with enough contrast versus the surround. You want to be able to see the edge of a step versus the tread of the step below, so you know where that edge is and you know where the level changes are. So what those contrast levels are play a big role in that visual acuity. LRV is basically the percentage of light that arrives at a surface and reflected back to the viewer. So it is simply that reflected, how much of that light is reflected back. The more light that's reflected back, the better. It allows you to sort of see a surface better, but also again having differentiation between two adjacent surfaces is very important. Because contrast helps us identify everything from obstacles to being able to read other visual cues in a space. This is an example I always love to give. So this is the Calatrava Museum, and it's a fantastic example of magnificent architecture, and a fantastic and magnificent example of extremely terrible contrast and accessibility. The whole space is white. Everything is white in this space. And as you can see from this picture, right, you have these large sort of triangular structures, these architectural features that wrap over the ceiling and come down to the floor and create a lip. I'm not sure if you can see my cursor here, but at the very bottom here, this is a raised curb that is there, and that is white, and the floor is white. And when there's a lot of daylight outside coming through, which is encouraged by the way the facility windows are facing and shaped, you get all of these lines of light that come shooting across the floor like that, which creates this very dramatic pattern of light and darkness. But none of it matches any of the obstacles that are in space. It is incredibly difficult to notice where these obstacles are because there is no value contrast. You can't see any difference in color or reflectance, and it makes these obstacles invisible. Now, granted, this is a dramatic example of this, but you can find this all over the place. Here's an example of confusing patterns. You know, the example on the left, I can't even begin to fathom who thought that was a good idea. I mean, it looks like everywhere you step is going to be some kind of level change, and it can be very, very confusing. Picture on the right is very common in some older buildings where we see tiled or hard flooring on stairs that's done in this sort of pattern that can make it extremely confusing when you're trying to navigate to understand where that level change is. So in the picture on the right, you actually have really good value contrast between the darker and the lighter tiles, but they're just scattered randomly all over the place and it doesn't make any sense. So it is very, very confusing and defeats the purpose of having that value contrast. This can translate simply to your home stairs, right? A lot of people have carpeted stairs or runners down the stairs. Having confusing patterns like this is the same thing as having very little value contrast, right? You cannot discern where the level changes because one step looks like the next step and looks like the next step all the way down to the bottom, and it makes it extremely difficult. And these are applications that should be easy to fix, right? These are things that we should be able to change. Uh, the example on the left is another great example in the built environment. I don't know if you can see here, but this sort of retaining wall by this water feature, these are actually steps that go down into the water feature. There is no marking that says there's a step there. You can't really tell that there's a level change, and it's hard to tell even where it eventually goes until you step in the water, particularly if you have a very severe visual impairment. So there's nothing that prevents you from walking down, and when you do, it's hard to tell that you are in fact stepping down until you do. However, on the right side is an example of a simple contrast strip at the edge of every tread of the stair. I mean, it's not a great stair for other reasons, not having enough handrails and things like that. But from a visual perspective, at least you can see now where the edge of each step is and have sort of a fighting chance to understand where those level changes are. And the example on the far right, where this access to a basement has some yellow warning tape around it, definitely not sexy from a design standpoint, but neither is falling down and hurting yourself. So that is a simple and great application for marking some serious hazards, both so you can see them, but also so you know that it is a place not to go. It is a serious hazard versus the stripes on the steps that are there just to improve your vision for access to those steps. Here's another example of applications for stairs where you have on the picture on the right, the actual tile material, right? That's all the same, but they put these traction strips and these visual strips on the edge that are not only a contrast in color, but are raised so you can feel them with your foot when you put your foot there. So you know immediately that your foot is at the edge and you can see this contrast. Very effective. And it's the same thing on the right. There is a noticeable difference in color, and you actually feel with your foot that is something that is there. Put a lot of emphasis on things like stairs because they're the greatest instances of falls on stairs or when you have any type of level change. Um, Anytime you have a reflective surface or a clear or transparent panel, this is a problem. Having particularly large surfaces like this You can obviously imagine in commercial environments and public environments like these images. It happens all the time. We see glass doors and mirrored walls. We see mirrored backs, like at the bus stop over here. Oh, I'm sorry, clear glass at the bus stop on the right hand picture. And we see these instances all around us. However, these also exist in our homes, right? What about the trend to put in showers like this that are, glass walled showers that have these very minimal frames and form factors that are, you know, granted, they are very visually designed, sexy, and they're great and they look wonderful. But you can't. You got to give yourself a fighting chance here. You can still do this, and you can give yourself some better indication that there is an obstacle there. Same thing with simply your Tupperware in your kitchen, right? Clear Tupperware and clear glass bowls. These are nice to be able to see what's inside them and stuff like that, but it can make them very difficult to get out of a high cabinet or somewhere where you may not have a lot of light and visual contrast to be able to see what it is you're grabbing, and you can end up having an accident, breaking something, having shattered glass. All these are little things. However, there are simple things that we can do. Whenever you have that glass shower or something like that, you can put in some frosted strips, some design pattern across the face of that. Or if you have glass doors in your office, for example, or in a conference room, wherever it may be, there are ways of just putting simple visual indicators that create some level of contrast to give you a better forewarning that there is an obstacle there, because it is very easy for anybody, even somebody with good vision, to simply not see one of these and walk into a wall. I've done it myself. So giving yourself some contrast striping or some kind of application is very important. Anything that's clear or mirrored. Your Tupperware, using bright colors, and being consistent with those bright colors as far as what you like to put in them is even easier. Because then it allows you to say, well, in the blue bowls, I always put, this kind of food. In the green bowls is always my salad, whatever it may be. But it's much easier to discern these in a cabinet that may not have any lighting in it, or in a drawer, to be able to reach for them and get what you want. Small details, but and this kind of concept translates across the board to your entire living environment. Um, Another problem are polished surfaces. So we were talking about like glass doors and windows and entryways and mirrored surfaces. What about your floor? Hardwood floors, wonderful. Except most hardwood floors have a level of sheen on them. And in environments where you have a lot of windows and a lot of sunlight in particular, not just daylight, but actual sunlight gets into those environments, it can create a lot of reflected glare off the floors that can obscure your vision. So we're talking about serious disability glare that can hide an obstacle like a level change, if you have to step down into environment, or may hide or may present you with a condition where you think there's a level change and there is not. That is also a tripping hazard. Another aspect of that you see in this picture too is glare that's created from sources of daylight. Daylight is the number one best light exposure you can have, and I will always advocate for that. But you need to be able to control it in the environments you are. So being careful about your window treatment is an important thing. Personally, I feel like one of the worst things you can have on large windows are shears, because all shears do are create this enormous glowing surface. Right? You think that they're cutting down on the intensity of the lights, and I guess effectively they are, but they're creating the big glare bomb. And what happens is when you go into an environment like this, your eyes will always adjust to the brightest thing in the room. And so if you have these very bright shears and these windows that are glowing so brightly, it's going to make everything else look darker. and that's going to impair your vision in the darker areas of the space. So using things like horizontal blinds, or having other kinds of treatments like louvers outside, or anything that is allows you to redirect that light and control the amount of light that's in there without creating a glowing orb like this is to your benefit. Skylights as well. Not many people have skylights in their homes, though some people do use those overhead illuminators that essentially is a skylight that brings in daylight into a what looks like a light fixture. And it brings into light into spaces like closets and things like that. I have some clients who have these in their homes, and it is great to bring the daylight in, but sometimes those get excessively bright, and then again, it creates the same problem where your eye is adjusting to that and it's making the rest of the room look dark. And then there's also the general lighting in your space, right? In your home or whatever your workspace, do you have exposed lamps, exposed bulbs? Is there excessive brightness from it? Do you have track lighting that's pointing in your eyes from certain perspectives? You can get sensations of glare from all these different things, and it does not take very long for you to have a moment where your eyes are adjusting inappropriately and you cannot see when you're about to take a step or you're about to, turn a corner or something like that. So understanding what the viewpoints are to all the lighting and where it's positioned in your house is incredibly important. Here is just an example of using shades to be able to control the light, using horizontal blinds. There are some very beautiful interior design elements that you can use other than shears. Even shutters that have louvers on them, some very, very beautiful applications of that. So there are options for you to do aesthetically pleasing things that allow you to control the light. There are even shades that allow you to drop the shade from the top as well as the bottom, so you can really sort of manipulate it and get light up onto the ceiling so it's distributed throughout your space, but limit the amount of sunlight that is streaking across your floor, making it hard to see. All right, object placement. This is less of a lighting thing and more of an interior design thing, but being consistent and repetitive with the placement of objects in your spaces is of uber importance, right? This is going to build muscle memory, and this is good in aiding your wayfinding. Being consistent and repetitive will just help you understand where things are all the time. So that is very, very important with any type of visual impairment. Doorways and corridors need to be wide enough to accommodate users. Many old homes have very short or narrow doorways into certain rooms, like small bathrooms or closets and things, that can be very difficult for someone to navigate. And unpredictable furniture can create obstacles that people trip over. So if you're moving furniture around because you're having people over, you have to be very conscious to make sure that you move it back and you have this sort of consistent and repetitive placement of objects in your home that just don't move around, as just a matter of how you sort of live with your environment. Intuitive locations, consistent locations. In the commercial world, we encourage architects to avoid circular routes, to put things like restrooms in the same place on every floor. But then there's also two things that I think translate across residential environments as well as commercial environments is highlighting destinations and delineating boundaries. And by delineating boundaries, I mean having enough contrast between, again, those stairs, each tread, having enough contrast between your wall and your floor, having enough contrast, say, on the door frame, versus the surrounding wall. Or if you have handrails or banisters in different areas of your house, making sure that they are a contrasting color to the wall they're attached to so they're easy to find and grab onto. Highlighting destinations just means of putting lights in the places where you want to get to. So making sure you have enough light at the destination. This is sort of the visual wayfinding construct. So putting the light in enough places in your living rooms, in your activity areas, in your kitchen. It's not to say you shouldn't have enough light in your hallways, but you want more light in those activity areas to highlight that destination, to help with the visual transition. Signage, you're probably going to have signage in your home, but you may have things on your refrigerator. You may have offices you have some control over. I won't spend much time with this, but I have a friend who used to work for, used to work on the ADA code, and she has a visual impairment. And she used to always say that I can't really read signage unless I can get so close to it I can kiss it. And so we sort of adopted this concept of kissable signage, and that all signage should be at a height that someone can walk right up to it and be able to read it. And you need to have enough contrast. The picture on the right is the Mayo Clinic, and you may see there at the very top header between the brick columns, they have a sign that says pediatrics in one direction and geriatrics in the other. And it's so hard to read because the background is gray and the lettering is just another shade of gray, which is antithetical to a healthcare environment. But we find these all over the place. So that's very important example, sort of show you if those were just simply in another darker color or a much lighter color, there would be a greater instance of being able to see that and not miss that. Using brighter colors for things like door frames and wayfinding signage also helps. Doing this in your cabinets, for example, color coding shelves, or putting lights inside your cabinets. If you're doing a renovation, are a great way of increasing the contrast level within spaces that are often dark. Making sure that you have under cabinet lighting directly for your task that is fully hidden so you can't see the fixtures underneath and they are just emanating light down onto the counter. This allows your eyes to not adjust to the bright lights under the cabinets, but to adjust to the light that they're providing on the critical surface. So using that is very important. Having, again, different contrast levels for your backsplash versus the countertop, and different colors for the interior of your cabinets versus the exterior cabinet is also very important. All right. I know I'm running out of time, so I'm just quickly going to bump through some of this. Um, I just want luminance and glare. Luminance is the amount of light that enters the eye and comes directly from the light source, and our glare perception is based on how much contrast. So our eye can actually adapt to a lot of light coming at it. When it has a hard time with is that if there's a lot of light from one source and then not a lot of light surrounding that source, so you have a really dark surround and then a bright light. So think of this happens when I go to the airport all the time, where you've got this bright sun coming through the glazing, but the rest of the car door and everything is so dark around it that everybody is in silhouette when you look at them. You need to control the direct sunlight that comes into your homes and into your office and environments. You also need to make sure that any adjustable fixtures are shielded and pointed only directly to where they need to be, and that you always sort of constantly assess that you're not getting any sparkle. You shouldn't have fixtures with bare bulbs, chandeliers with a lot of bare bulbs on them, and sconces are very problematic. And again, here's another example of sunlight. This is the same space at different times of day, and you can see what the sunlight is doing coming through the glazing on the floor. And that is very, very difficult for somebody to navigate when you've got all these changes between light and shadow, and you don't know where there's a level change or not a level change. And we see these same things in many homes. Transition zones. Transition zones are really important. I'm going to jump to the next slide. We see this application in commercial, but what about your own foyer in your own home? Your own foyer is a transition zone between the exterior environment and the rest of your interior environment. And that is a location you want to consider to have enough light, more light that you may think that you need in that environment. So when you enter your home from a bright sunny day and you walk into that darker home, that you have that transition area when you can adjust, let your eyes adjust as you take your shoes off and your jacket off or whatever you're doing before you enter the lower light levels of your home. So that is a great strategy to have. Consistent lighting, more even lighting in a space is very important as well. You don't want to have dramatic shadows like you often see from images like this. And highlighting destinations. Here's a great example of where all the door frames are color coded for a space. So everybody knows where their apartment is, everybody knows what room they need to go to. So we're delineating destinations. All right, so there are some resources here. I will send this presentation to Tara so she can distribute this. But there are some links here and access. So for the documents that I referenced in the beginning of the presentation for your reading pleasure, and if you want to get deeper into the information. This is a great website as well. One of my colleagues did this for her master's thesis, designforsight.com, which talks about all these different modalities that I discussed briefly in this presentation. And you can actually look at examples of the problem and how to solve them and how this may relate to certain experiences you have in your own homes. Okay, right under the wire.
Greg, thank you very much. I didn't want to interrupt you. Just wanted you to finish the presentation, and I would like to open it. I know we're running out of time, but I would like to open it for some questions. If it's okay with you to stay a few minutes.
Sure. Absolutely.
So if anybody has any questions, please unmute yourselves or raise your hands for any questions with Greg. Mark?
Yeah, Tara, Tara, my question has to do with, material is very good for somebody who's a generalist or has a profit motive or is it maybe thinking of construction. But for people like me who have low vision and want to understand better the techniques and methods, the suggestions to make my living quarters more low vision friendly, what are the resources that Greg can give you and you make available to us without going through an awful lot of steps and so forth? Because I think the desire of most of us is to improve our environment. And I didn't hear much of that in what he said from an individual standpoint, but I'm wondering how we can make what he has available to us through you, Tara.
Greg, are there lighting designers, like a list of residential lighting designers that people can access? Because many people don't know which lights, which bulbs to use at their homes.
Right.
Any such list or what to do?
Yeah, that's a good question. So the first thing is I'll just refer back to this consumer guide that I mentioned earlier. And so this is the first resource that I think people should use. They should go through this because it specifically talks about the residential environment and talks about those specific spaces and some of the simple interventions that you could do. As far as lighting designers, to be honest with you, there is no particular list. There are definitely residential focused into lighting designers out there. I personally don't know of any that are specializing in low vision environments, though there are many that have that experience. The three things that are most important again are that you provide more light in your space than you think you need. You always want to add more light. You want to be able to control the glare. So anything that is physically too bright for you is you need to remove that from your space. So the best way to do that is to have more lighting fixtures, table lamps, floor lamps, ceiling lamps. You want different layers of lighting coming from more sources so no one single source has to be very bright. Well, a common application in residence is that you have just, one big light on the ceiling that's lighting a whole space. Could be a ceiling fan that has one big bright light. That's not what you want. You want to add light wherever you can. You want to have, again, table lamps, floor lamps by all your reading specific chair lights for task lighting. As many that you can put in a space that's reasonable to then brighten up that space. And then use finish colors, new paint colors, to brighten up the reflectance value of walls. Having dark colored walls and things are sort of detrimental to the light being able to bounce around and create a greater volume of light. Um, there are a lot of products on the market for task lighting that are sort of low vision oriented, that have reduced blue light in them. There's a number of websites that you can go to find reading lights and things that remove the blue lights and are a little warmer. So if you like to read in bed at night, you're not disrupting your circadian rhythm. But overall, this is the whole process. Is number one is adding more light. You just need more light. And the more sources that you can put around, again, means that no one thing needs to be so bright that it becomes a source of glare. And I'm also a big advocate of lighting fixtures that hide the light bulb, right? So you don't want exposed light bulbs. Hopefully that provides a little bit of
Yeah,
context.
thank you, Greg. And I will send out the user guide that you have sent me with the recording, so people can go over it. And now we have Carol and then Janice. Carol Rubin, you are unmuted.
Oh, I didn't have a question.
Oh, okay. Okay. Janice?
I just wanted to confirm, Greg, you're going to send Tara how we can obtain the consumer guide?
I've already sent it to her, so
Yeah.
she can
Thank
pass
you
it
so
along.
much.
Yeah.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
We'll send it out with the recording, Janice.
Thank you.
Okay. Greg, I always learn something new. Thank you so much, because it's not only the lighting which is the issue, the lack of it and how it affects our health, whether it's mental or physical. That's a major point as well. So we really appreciate everything.
It's my pleasure, and I also, I want to acknowledge to everybody in the group is that I feel everybody's frustration, and I understand the frustration, because as a practitioner, it is challenging for me. 30 years in this business, challenging for me in this day to affect change in environments, mostly because of the limited tools and things that are out there, particularly for residential environments for people. And it is expensive a lot of times, and it requires a great deal of effort. But I want to encourage people to experiment a lot with portable lighting, light fixtures that you can move around the home and put in different places, because how you interact with your environment and whatever your specific visual issues are going to be unique. So portable lighting gives you that opportunity to say, well, it doesn't really work so well for me over here. Maybe if I move these table lamps and these floor lamps to another space, another area within this space, that gives you an opportunity to do that. And obviously your interior design, your finish colors of things are very important as well. The lighter those colors are, the greater ability you're going to have to make that environment a little bit brighter. So that's the number one thing. More light. We need more light to navigate and to do the things that we do.
This was an absolutely phenomenal presentation from the beginning to the end, and telling us how lighting affects our health. I've never heard such a good presentation, even from the ophthalmologist. This was absolutely wonderful. Thank you.
I fully agree.
I appreciate that. I appreciate that. And
Yeah.
I wish we had more time to
Mhm.
go into some more details with things, but there's a lot to absorb for sure. And
what is the speaker's last name? I thoroughly agree. It was a phenomenally helpful presentation.
Okay, Greg, can you pronounce your last name?
Yeah, sure. It's Guarnaccia. I'll try and find the last slide here. There you go.
And you will have it in the user guide. When you get it, his name is there as well.
Okay, I've just called in, Tara. I've called in, so don't leave me out. I do want to get his consumer guide. This is Gloria Yedinek.
Of course, Gloria, you will get it. You are on our mailing list.
All right, thank you, and thank you, Greg.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us today, and thank you again, Greg. We really appreciate it.
Tara. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Greg.
Okay. Bye-bye.